First question comes from Richard out in Oregon, and it's an exterior question. Cedar siding corner 6 inches by 6 inches where the deck meets house was subjected to water from the gutter. Gutter has been replaced and I now need to fix siding corner without replacing the whole wall of siding. So just for reference, I'll give you the link later on where you can submit your own questions, and then every week we'll go through and select some questions that are relevant, seasonality, right? So relevant to the season, and it's going to be most applicable to our audience to help the most people out. And then pictures. The more pictures, the better. If you usually give a zoomed out picture like this, kind of setting the scene, and then a zoomed in picture of the actual problem, that really helps and makes it for a much better question that we'll probably be able to feature here actually on the video. So let's take a look here. Gutters have been at least corrected or replaced. That makes sense. This area with the multiple roof lines, the gutters here, if they back up, overflow, you probably don't get great sun in this area. So I can definitely see how any moisture getting on wood and sitting there can rot away and cause wood damage. Now, this was said to be cedar. I'm definitely not in the Pacific Northwest, so I'm not super familiar with this type of siding. To me, this looks like a 4 foot by 8 foot panel, so siding panel, and maybe it's cedar or it's just made to look like cedar. And also why I would say that, if I zoom in here, let me zoom in on that picture, just confirming we're not tongue and groove boards. Yeah, we look like we have some type of seam here where we probably went past 8 foot. Which would make me think that, again, these are panels. So this section out here would be one full panel, and then that 8 foot would probably get us up to our roof line here, which makes sense. Now, it sounds like from your question that you don't want to replace that whole thing. You just want to kind of treat that one area. You can do that. You could get yourself an oscillating tool with a wood blade. I like to use some type of template. So I might write a piece of flooring or some straight edge along that trim on the bottom, and then just cut myself a nice clean line so it's easier to replace that piece of paneling later on. But that's just me. You can freehand it, it's not going to be a huge deal. But then you could address the issue that you find. Now, I would want to open up and see what's going on underneath. Usually that outside paneling or outside siding is not your only issue. Usually the sheathing, maybe a 1/2 inch plywood or whatever's actually sheathing between the stud walls and the outside siding, probably also has some issues. So you're going to want to make sure that you remediate any moisture, mold, any issues there, and not just the exterior issue that was caused by the gutters overflowing or whatever kind of water leak you had there. For me, this is how I would handle it. I would actually remove these yellow trim pieces. I would remove those carefully because I would want to put those right back in place once I'm done. So I would not want to snap those and aggressively pull them off the wall. So I would pull those off, put them off to the side, and I actually would remove the whole panel. I would start off under the corner that I just revealed because I took the trim off, and I'd start prying that paneling away from the house, trying to get the entire section of panel in that area removed. Now, just a caution, that's probably going to be 8 foot tall and go all the way over to your window right there. I'm trying to keep that in place. I'm trying to keep that one whole piece, because what I would want to do is, now I've opened up that wall section, I want to look at what's going on underneath and, again, remediate any moisture, mold, or replace any sheathings needed. And then I would just replace that whole panel. Why I'm doing that is because if I cut down here low at the actual water damage, I'm going to be piecing in this paneling and creating another seam that I'm going to have to seal. But if we already know moisture kind of gets in here and sits in here, I want to kind of seal that up as much as possible. So if I have a nice continuous panel there with no seams, that's at least my preference. And I know you might not want to hear that because it might sound like a lot more work, but to be honest, it's actually not. As long as you remove this whole panel and take your time, you can use that panel as a template. So you're going to get a 4 foot by 8 foot new panel from your home improvement store. And if you've removed that original panel, all the cut lines you can use as a template and lay that over your new panel, draw out your new cut lines, cut that off, and now you have a perfectly shaped panel to replace your old one. And I just think that's a better path, a better plan of action. So when you replace that old one, you're going to want to prime that, paint it with a good exterior paint. Don't forget your old panel you can use to paint match just in case you don't have your exterior paint. Put your wood trim back into place and use a good exterior caulk. I would want to prime and paint the panel before putting the trim back because I actually want to prime and paint the entire panel, even the section underneath that trim. So even though I'm putting caulk and trying to keep the water out of that, if any water gets in behind that trim, I have a primed and painted surface that's going to be a little more resilient to any moisture damage. So that's how I would handle that. And we have a ton of great viewers, a ton of professionals with infinitely more experience than I have. So I do welcome any more comments down below the video if you guys would take a little bit different approach, and especially if you're from this part of the country and you see this all the time.